As wonderful as they are, children can challenge even the strongest marriages. But there are things that couples can do to keep their marriage strong.
Basically, don't have kids. Here with that advice is Counselor Kelly Olson of the Village Family Service Center. Thanks so much for being here. I will never forget the experience. I'm sitting in a psychology class at Stanford. A prof is talking about this graph of like happiness in a marriage and how long you're married. And he's like, yo, yeah, you first get married, people are like so happy. And then he literally goes, they have kids, and woof, the marriage quotient just goes way down. And I was like, wait, what? Like, no one ever tells you that.
Yeah.
So what's the kind of conversation you would have with people who go, hey, here's what you can anticipate to keep the marriage happy, keep it going, but know that kids are going to throw some challenges in there?
Well, even the childless couples actually have a reduction in satisfaction. So it's not just us that have kids that have a reduction in satisfaction. It's also the kids that are the people that don't have kids as well. So, but yeah, I mean, it can be a bit of a surprise for people if they're not reading, if they haven't taken those psychology courses and things like that. And so it can be kind of disheartening to find that there's just this disconnect between you and your spouse that you had never experienced before. And so it definitely takes a lot of work to kind of keep that satisfaction going, for sure.
So work like, we always hear you're supposed to plan time to spend together.
Yes.
Like plan those dates.
Yeah, well, and so you have this baby and you're doing all these diapers like you talked about, and you're so busy and you're so exhausted and stuff, and you absolutely have to take an effort to be together as a couple. And so I think it's very important to spend, designate a special time together. And so let's say you're morning people, and so every morning you have coffee together. Or let's say your work allows for you to have lunch every lunchtime. Or maybe you don't get any time together and your only time to connect is at nighttime. It's just important that at some point in time in your day, you're reconnecting somehow. And so it might be for 15 minutes, it might be for half an hour, it might be reading a book, it might be doing an activity together, but some way you're finding each other again throughout that day, throughout all those diapers and baths and running around and cooking supper and doing dishes and stuff. You're just trying to reconnect and keeping that connection strong.
So really plan it out. I mean, put it in each of your phones so you know.
Well, I mean, I think it takes definite commitment. You can't just happen on it. You have to think about it and you have to really focus on it. And that's one of the things that they talk a lot about in marriage is that it takes work, it takes commitment. You can't take it for granted, and you really have to work on it every single day. And if you take it for granted, that's usually when things start to slip.
Talk about opening the dialogues. I think you hear a lot of people say, when we're married, there's no kids, we're totally focused on each other. All of a sudden, this other human being shows up, and now it's sort of like each other can become somewhat secondary. And I think sometimes you can have feelings that are like, wait a second, what about me?
Yeah.
But you don't really want to have that conversation because you're both exhausted. So any tips on how to open up that dialogue?
Neglect is the...
Yeah, well, stereotypical thoughts are that the woman feels so differently because her body's changed and she's so fatigued and stuff because she might be breastfeeding and stuff, and the man's like, what am I, second fiddle kind of a deal? And so you just get out of that disconnection after you have that baby. And it's very common to have those experiences, but there's lots of literature out there, there's lots of classes that talk about it, but then there's also just to have a conversation about how we're going to deal with this. We know, because we took Psychology 101, like you were talking about, that there's a dip in satisfaction. How are we going to handle it? And so just to approach it with the mindset that we're going to work at this. We know it's coming, and so we're going to work at it. We're going to make a valiant effort at it. We're not just going to be kind of lackadaisical about it, because marriage does take a lot of work and commitment.
All right, much more on this topic after we come back from the break. Stay close.